The photograph looked ordinary at first. 7 people sat and stood beneath heavy curtains, their faces stiff beneath the cold light of an old camera. 3 men stood in the back. 4 women sat in front. Their clothes were neat, their hands carefully folded, and their expressions carried the quiet seriousness of another century. But hidden behind that carefully arranged family portrait was a secret that no one in the county wanted spoken aloud. The woman seated near the center was not simply the mistress of a Georgia plantation. She was the daughter of the man who built it, the sister of the men who inherited it, and the guardian of children whose futures depended upon her mercy. Yet by 1847, people whispered that she had turned against her own blood. They said she controlled the family through debts, hidden papers, broken promises, and fear. They said she used the suffering of enslaved people to increase her power. And when one frightened young woman disappeared from the plantation records, the story became darker than anyone could have imagined. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. For years, the Whitmore family had been respected across central Georgia. Their plantation stood beside a narrow road lined with oak trees, where summer heat settled heavily over the fields. The main house rose above the land with tall white columns, dark shutters, and a wide porch that looked peaceful from a distance. But peace was often only what outsiders were allowed to see. Behind the house stood the kitchens, smokehouses, barns, and rows of small wooden cabins where enslaved families lived under constant control. At sunrise, the sound of bells carried across the property. Men and women walked toward the fields while the morning mist still covered the ground. The plantation produced cotton, and cotton brought money. Money brought influence, and influence allowed the Whitmore family to hide many things. Eleanor had been born into comfort during the first years of the 19th century. Her father, Samuel Whitmore, was a wealthy planter who believed land should remain in the of one family forever. He taught his sons to manage crops and business accounts. He taught Eleanor something different. He taught her to listen. As a child, she sat quietly beside him while visitors discussed land prices, debts, marriages, and inheritance. Men often ignored her because she was a girl. They spoke freely while she remained near the window, with a book resting on her lap. But Eleanor remembered every word. She learned which neighboring families owed money. She learned which merchants could be trusted. She learned that a person could control another without raising a hand. All that was needed was knowledge. When Eleanor was 16, her mother died after a long illness. The house became quieter, and Samuel began depending on his daughter. She managed letters, organized household accounts, and supervised servants inside the main house. People praised her intelligence. They called her devoted, but few understood how much power she was quietly collecting. Years passed. Eleanor married a lawyer named Thomas Hale, a man from Savannah who admired her confidence. Their marriage brought new connections and greater wealth. But Thomas was not prepared for the woman Eleanor would become. She did not want to be protected. She wanted control. When Samuel Whitmore died, his will divided the plantation among his children. Eleanor received a large portion of land, several buildings, and a financial share in the cotton business. Her brothers received fields and livestock. At first, the arrangement appeared fair. Then Eleanor discovered a sentence buried deep inside the will. If one heir failed to pay certain debts connected to the plantation, the other heirs could claim part of that person's property. The words were small. Their meaning was enormous. Eleanor began studying every account connected to the estate. She examined old loans and unpaid taxes. She wrote letters to merchants. She questioned workers about shipments of cotton. Slowly, she learned that her younger brother, William, had borrowed money without telling the family. William was kind-hearted but careless. He spent money freely and believed the plantation would always provide more. He had a wife and 2 young children, and he trusted Eleanor to help him manage the estate. That trust would soon become his greatest danger. In the spring of 1847, a severe storm damaged several cotton fields. Heavy rain flattened young plants and flooded parts of the property. The family lost money, and merchants demanded payment. William asked Eleanor for help. She agreed. But the document she placed before him was not a simple loan. It gave Eleanor temporary control over part of his land. William signed without reading every line. Perhaps he believed his sister would never betray him. Perhaps he believed family meant safety. He was wrong. Within months, Eleanor began making decisions about William's property. She changed work assignments and ordered larger cotton shipments. She demanded longer hours from enslaved laborers, even after the fields had been damaged by rain. The people forced to work under her authority noticed the change immediately. Among them was a young enslaved woman named Ruth. Ruth had been born on the Whitmore plantation. Her mother had worked in the kitchen, and her father had died years earlier after an illness. Ruth was 22 in 1847, quiet but observant. She knew the plantation better than many members of the Whitmore family. She knew where old records were stored. She knew which doors remained unlocked. And she knew that Eleanor had begun hiding letters. One evening, Ruth was asked to clean the study after Eleanor had finished writing. The room smelled of candle wax and old paper. A fire burned softly in the fireplace. As Ruth collected empty cups, she noticed a folded document beneath the desk. She should have left it alone. Instead, she looked. The paper contained a list of names. Some belonged to enslaved families, others belonged to members of the Whitmore family. Beside each name were numbers: money, land, debt. And at the bottom was a sentence written in Eleanor's careful handwriting: "Those who remain dependent will remain obedient." Ruth felt a cold fear move through her. She placed the paper back where she had found it, but she could not forget the words. During the following weeks, strange things began happening across the plantation. Families were separated without explanation. Workers were moved between fields. Property was sold to pay debts no one understood. William protested. He demanded to see the accounts. Eleanor refused. Their arguments became louder. One afternoon, several workers heard William shouting from inside the main house. "You promised to protect this family. "And I am protecting it," Eleanor answered, "by taking everything, by saving what can still be saved." William left the room with his face pale and his hands trembling. That night he visited the quarters where Ruth lived. He had never spoken to her privately before. He asked if she had seen any letters or records connected to Eleanor. Ruth hesitated. She understood the danger. If Eleanor discovered that she had read the document, punishment could follow. But something in William's voice made her speak. "There are papers in the study," Ruth whispered. "What kind of papers? Names, numbers, things that do not belong together." William stared toward the main house. For the first time, he seemed afraid of his own sister, but Eleanor was already watching. From the upstairs window, she had seen William walking toward the quarters. And by morning, Ruth had disappeared. No one was told where she had gone. Her small room was empty. Her blanket remained folded beside the bed. Her friends were warned not to ask questions. William confronted Eleanor. "Where is Ruth?" Eleanor did not look away. "She has been transferred." "To where?" "That is not your concern." "She knows something." Then perhaps she should learn to remain silent. William understood the warning. But he did not yet understand how far Eleanor was willing to go. That answer would arrive 3 days later, when a locked wooden box was discovered beneath the floorboards of the old plantation office. Inside were letters, debt records, and a document that could destroy the Whitmore family forever. And one name appeared again and again: Eleanor Whitmore. The wooden box was covered in dust. It had been hidden beneath loose floorboards in the old plantation office, a building no longer used for daily business. The room smelled of damp wood and dried tobacco. Broken furniture stood against the walls, and spider webs covered the corners. William had gone there searching for records. Instead, he found evidence. Inside the box were letters written over many years. Some were from merchants. Some were from lawyers. Others carried the names of neighboring plantation owners. But the most troubling papers were written by Eleanor herself. She had carefully recorded loans made to members of her family. She listed money borrowed by William, land agreements involving her older brother Charles, and private financial troubles connected to their father's estate. She had known about these debts long before anyone else, and she had waited. William read each page beneath the weak light of a lantern. Then he found a letter dated February 1847. It was addressed to a cotton merchant in Macon. Eleanor had offered part of William's property as security for a private agreement. She had done this before William signed the document giving her temporary control. The meaning was clear. She had not stepped forward to save her brother. She had prepared to take his land. William sat silently for several minutes. His anger slowly became something deeper: grief. He remembered Eleanor as a child. He remembered her standing beside their mother in the garden. He remembered how she had defended him when their father punished him. He had believed she loved him. Now he wondered whether she had only learned how to use love as another form of control. But the letters revealed something even more disturbing. Eleanor had been secretly purchasing debts connected to other members of the family. When relatives struggled to repay money, she gained influence over their land and decisions. She was building power piece by piece, and the plantation was the center of everything. Yet one letter contained a name William did not recognize: Ruth. The letter stated that a young woman had been moved to another property until the matter of the household records is resolved. William felt his heart pound. Ruth had not simply been transferred. She had been removed because she knew too much. He returned to the main house before dawn. Eleanor was sitting in the dining room, drinking coffee beside an open window. The first light of morning touched the curtains. She looked calm. William placed the letters on the table. "I found these." Eleanor's expression did not change. "You should not have searched through private records. You planned this. I planned for the future. You used our father's estate against us. Our father wanted this land protected. You are destroying the family to control it." Eleanor slowly placed her cup on the table. The family was already destroying itself. William leaned closer. "Where is Ruth?" For the first time, Eleanor looked uneasy. "She is alive." "That was not my question. She was sent away." "Why?" "Because she entered places where she did not belong. She found your records. She found nothing she could understand." William struck the table with